Hello, I'm Matt Galloway, and this is The Current Podcast.
The bottom line here is that we're not going anywhere. I am not going anywhere. I wouldn't be running if I didn't absolutely believe that I am the best candidate to beat Donald Trump in 2024. I not only believed that from the beginning, but I wanted to reassert it and demonstrate that it's true. And I'm going to be doing that all through this week and from here on.
It's not every day the president of the United States phones into a cable news morning show, but it's just Joe Biden's latest attempt to reassure supporters. His performance in the debate 2 weeks ago has prompted a heated conversation within the Democratic Party.
This is an emergency for the Democratic Party, and we need to handle this, and we need to handle it quickly. He needs to step down now, and I say that with respect and compassion. He needs to move aside. We need to be having the conversation over the next 2 months that we should have been having over the last year and a half.
That was former long-shot Democratic presidential candidate Marianne Williamson talking to Fox News on Saturday. Just 4 months before the election, there's a steady stream of Democrats suggesting it's time for Joe to go. Joining me is James Zagby. He's a longtime member of the Democratic National Committee who has proposed a plan for Biden to step aside. Also with me is Christy Setzer. She's the head of New Heights Communications and a longtime Democratic strategist. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Morning to you.
James, let me start with you. You think it's time for Joe to go. When was the moment you became convinced that he should step aside?
Well, let me say my plan that I wrote to the chairman of the party was not calling on Biden to step down. It was to say, should he step down, here are the steps we can take. But when did I first become concerned? Well, I've been concerned for well over a year. I really opposed getting rid of Iowa and New Hampshire. I thought we needed a robust primary. I think we have an incredible bench on the Democratic side, and they needed to have an opportunity to show their stuff. We didn't do it. We're down to this point, and we have a debate on the 27th, and it was a terrible performance. And what concerned me was not just the debate, but in the days following the debate, every effort that was made to say, I'm ready, I can do this, showed more verbal gaffes and more problems. Now, look, verbal gaffes are something we all do. I do them, we all do them. But when it becomes the focal point of press coverage and will be between now and November, then we're in a real problem. Focus ought to be on Donald Trump and his abysmal record and his horrific character, but instead it's going to be on this. And so my thought was the president should step down and we should have a plan in place to replace him in a very orderly but organized and I think open and disciplined manner.
And Christy, you think that the president should stay. Tell us more about that.
So I too have had a bit of an evolution on this issue, and I think it's important to understand that the conversation that we're having here is happening in good faith. We all want the same outcome. We all want to see Donald Trump defeated in November. We want the threat of fascism to go away, and we are having a very earnest and genuine conversation about the best way to do that. I think there's, good people on all sides of this argument. But what I believe is that it would be devastating to give up the power of incumbency. That is a powerful argument that Joe Biden has in which he is able to talk about his record of the last 3 years, which has been incredible. And I, can go through some of the pieces, but you know them as well as I do. We have an economy right now that is the envy of the world that, we can go on and on and on. And so I don't think that you want to give that up, especially 3.5 months before the election. I think the biggest thing that we want to do is be able to turn the conversation back to Donald Trump. And my concern is that in going through a process in which we, search around for another nominee, presumably it would be Kamala Harris, we're giving up valuable and wasted time that we just don't have right now. I think that Joe Biden took a massive step yesterday towards ending this debate when he captured the support of the Congressional Black Caucus, who said that they are solidly behind him, as well as capturing the support of the squad, AOC, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, even, who's had very big issues with him on Gaza. So I think that we're nearing the end of this discussion, and I think that's a good thing for party unity.
Well, that's certainly what Biden wants. Yesterday, of course, he sent a defiant letter to congressional Democrats saying he was staying in the race. He wrote, quote, "The question of how to move forward has been well aired for over a week now, and it's time for it to end. Any weakening of resolve or lack of clarity about the task ahead only helps Trump and hurts us. James, what do you think about that?
Well, look, that is the intention, but that's not going to be what plays out in reality. Every verbal gaffe will be noted. Every false step, every hesitant step will be attended to. And the result is that will be dominating the conversation for the next many months. I do not think that there'd be chaos, and I don't think it would be a disaster for Democrats. I think it would actually be quite exciting. A convention where we had our stars coming off the bench, showing their wares, engaged in a really incredible conversation that Democrats can have about the future and about how they want to continue to build on the legacy of Joe Biden. But they would be also operating in an arena in which the negatives of Joe Biden are off the table. His age and his lack of acuity, his inability to string together a couple of sentences. These are problems that people note, and they will be used. What would happen is that if we had people like Governor Newsom and Governor Shapiro and Whitmer and Pritzker and Cory Booker and Kamala Harris on stage, I think it would be an opportunity for Democrats to show we are a big grown-up party. And I love the prospect of it, and I think that the excitement we'd come out of the convention with would catapult us through November. And we'd have Joe Biden as a great campaigner. I mean, the speech he would give at the convention would be akin to George Washington's farewell address. It would be, this is bigger than me. This is about a legacy of a great country and a social progressive program that we need to continue to implement. It also, by the way, I have to say this because there are, in the polling that we're doing, Gaza has taken a toll. It's not just an issue that people disagree with, but it's taken a toll, yes, on Arab and Muslim voters in Michigan and other states, but also on young Black, Latino, Asian voters, young voters across the board. And a new candidate with a new vision, I think, would be able to bring back that part of the coalition that we need so desperately.
But age remains a huge consideration. A New York Times Siena College poll last week showed 74% of voters said Biden is too old to be effective. 59% of those Democrats as well agree with that. Christy, that's just math.
That's just math. It's a big problem. That was true before the debate, and it's true now. And the answer to it is, in fact, party unity. I think it's an awesome idea to have all of our party stars out there. This is basically what I've been calling the most important group project ever. And I don't think that it should or could be all on Joe Biden's hands to lift us out of this. I do think that you need to get not just Kamala Harris, not just cabinet secretaries, but again, all of the sort of Democratic stars out there campaigning, working on his behalf. That's normally something that you see closer to October before an election. But that needs to start happening now, and it needs to start happening in a big way. One of the things that I was sort of most disturbed by, I would say, post-debate was that there seemed to be almost an eerie silence as the campaign was determining the best way forward. But what he should have been doing during that time was basically what he did yesterday, shoring up support on the Hill, shoring up support with all of his, kind of top supporters, donors, et cetera, and having them get out there to show that we stand behind the president. So I'm not saying that age is not a concern. Of course it is. But I think that the counter to that is, again, getting more of the surrogates out there, laying out the consequences. And I think that the sooner that we do that, the quicker that we can get back to making this conversation again about the threat to America that Donald Trump and, say, Project 2025 poses.
I was curious and went on the Fox News website just before this interview, and there was an article there about a Trump strategist who was saying, Trump isn't jumping in this debate because he says the Democrats are in disarray. Why get in the way of them shooting at each other at this time? So, James, are you sensitive to that fact?
Of course I am. And I think that this is not Democrats shooting at each other. We're behaving like a party. A party ought to behave. We're not the party of budding fascism on the Republican side where someone is afraid even to raise their voice because the Donald will be upset and you'll be ostracized. This is not the way Democrats will behave or should behave. We ought to have a robust discussion about this, and we ought to plan for the future. This is not falling in line. This is having an internal discussion about the best way forward. And look, this is a problem that we haven't created. It's a problem that the debate performance and some issues before and after the debate have created, and the media has latched on. I mean, you guys are like Jesse Jackson, who I worked with in the 80s, said the press are like alligators. They smell blood in the water and they go crazy. And this is the blood in the water right now. I didn't put it there. It's there, and it's going to be there, and it's going to be talked about. I'm not saying something that is not already being talked about. It is, it's 2-3 stories a day come out, and we've got to deal with it. And I think, look, if Joe Biden's the nominee, we'll all get behind him because, frankly, his domestic record has been extraordinary, and I think we stand better chance in the future of accomplishing many of the things he still wants to do with him in the Oval Office. But we have a problem. We have to plan for the future. And should this not work out the way he wants it to work out, we have to know where we're going to go. All I was saying in my plan was I don't want simply a handoff to Kamala Harris. If he does step down, I think there needs to be an orderly procedure whereby we ensure the outcome is viewed as legitimate, democratic, open, and transparent.
I can hear the common ground between your positions. Both, let's show the strength of the party. Let's get some of the other stars up on stage there. But that would require a willingness and an openness from Joe Biden, of course, to do that. And certainly the messaging I'm hearing from the White House right now is he's almost, sees himself as being indispensable. I heard, Jon Stewart, the comedian, who said, get on board or shut the F up is not a compelling pro-democracy bumper sticker right now. So Christy, do you see this openness coming from Biden about let's make this a big tent campaign?
I think that he is frustrated right now after 2 weeks of incredibly brutal press following the debate performance. And again, look, there's an honest conversation to be had. I think this is actually a story, but I also think to the blood in the water point, I absolutely agree. And I've seen this play out a number of times over the course of different campaigns, where sometimes when the press essentially overplays its hand and really is seen as kind of taking on a candidate, then there's a bit of a rally around the candidate effect. And the most obvious example is John Fetterman, who, of course, had a stroke, was pilloried by the press and others for a very subpar debate performance, and of course won in the end because Pennsylvanians, I'm from Pennsylvania, said, this is our guy, stop it. And I think you're starting to see a bit of that here too. And I think that is what Joe Biden was talking about, which is that, look, it's been 2 weeks now. We have had this, we have talked about this. Can we sort of get it together and move on? One more example I'll give of that is, this is a bit long ago, but in 2008, Hillary Clinton was running against Barack Obama and many other people for the Democratic nomination. She had lost in Iowa. She was losing in New Hampshire. And in a sort of emotional moment, she teared up in an interview and said, I just don't want to see us fall back. And the press jumped all over her. Again, brutal, nonstop coverage of the fact that the woman candidate had cried. And that was how it was portrayed. And just a few days later, she won the state. I believe because there had been this rally around the candidate effect in response to the coverage. There was a poll this morning that showed, now granted, again, a Democratic poll, but that essentially showed that Biden and Trump were still tied, and that other potential nominees, potential tickets wouldn't do better. So I think what that shows is that the debate and the few days after were probably the nadir of where he is, and that he's actually sort of fought back from that. That, again, obviously James knows a lot more about polling than I do, but that is what I think is happening right now.
Well, let me take another historical example. It was August 8th, 1974, when an embattled president named Richard Nixon went on the air and told Americans that he was going to resign. James, what do you think it would take? I mean, that was 50 years ago. What do you think it would take for Joe Biden right now to, follow your idea, your suggestion of triggering a succession plan and saying it's time for me to step aside?
I would say to start with, hush up, boy. You got no business comparing Richard Nixon with Joe Biden. That's the first part. The second part is, look, what I think of as a historic parallel is, and this adamant, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. This is whatever. I remember George McGovern standing 1,000% behind Tom Eagleton as his vice presidential nominee. There are times when we get quite adamant. We're not going to do it. But then ultimately it becomes something that you got to do. I don't know. This is going to be a call for Joe Biden. If he decides not to step down, I'm going to support him. But if he does, all I was saying was that we really need to have a game plan moving forward. And it's got to be one that doesn't become a simple handoff, but is an organized process. And I think that there's plenty of time to have that organized process. Do I think he'll step down? I just don't know. I don't know what the dynamic is there within his inner circle. But if there are any more steps that move in the direction of causing questions about his mental acuity, then I think it's something that they have to consider. And you've got a lot of people right now running in close races in states that are not blue, in congressional districts that aren't blue, that are saying, I've got to take some distance here. That's not a good sign. And I think that these are all things that have to be considered. In the end, the party can't make the decision. Only the candidate can make the decision. But the party has to have a plan moving forward and can't just simply be lemmings that, march in the direction we're told to march. Yeah,
Christy, James raises a point, and we've already seen it right now with some of the Republicans who are campaigning in tight races that are saying, look, Biden is now a problem for brand Democrat, that this is going to hurt actual candidates, down ballot candidates. Do you see that as a potential problem now? Are you linking the candidacy of other, Senate candidates with Biden's struggles right now?
Yeah, I think I do see that. And I think that there's a number of examples of candidates in battleground states in which there's a pretty large delta between how Biden is polling versus how Senate or House candidates are polling, Democratic ones, in which you see sort of an example of, let's say, Jackie Rosen in Nevada doing very well, but Biden losing substantially in that state. And so obviously that gap needs to close and needs to close very quickly. One way that could happen is essentially reverse coattails, right? Is that the candidates at the bottom of the ticket on up, but not including the presidential race, get out, they get their supporters and then, sort of they get them on board with the president. Obviously, typically it's the reverse, is that the top of the ticket can pull up those at the bottom. But it's not, it's not unprecedented for you to see it the other way around as well. So I do think that they need to be closely watching what is happening in states. And I do think they need to be closely listening to those candidates who are saying, look, this is what I'm seeing. There's just not enthusiasm at the top of the ticket. I am trying my best right now to not just help my own race, but to help the president. And there's just this huge resistance. If that's the case, again, they need to figure out, both the down ballot candidates as well as the president's campaign, how to address that. What is the best way to address that? And get on it. But I think that, there's a chronology here. And the first step was to shore up Biden's support among kind of his, core constituency groups and base on, including on the Hill, before we can address that. That is the next step.
James, I'm just about out of time, so I'm asking you for one sentence here. What will it take for you to stand decisively beside and behind the candidacy of Joe Biden?
If he's the nominee. Mm-hmm. But let me say, I've never seen reverse coattails work.
Okay. Well, we'll be watching those coattails and seeing if they're going in which direction they will go. Great discussion with you both. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you.
James Zagby is a longtime member of the Democratic National Committee. Christy Setzer is the head of New Heights Communications and a Democratic strategist.